How you doing, Michael Joy?
I'm riding high. I'm like the murderous rider.
Did you win?
I kind of won. So
that doesn't sound like first place.
Yeah. So the PTQ that I wanted to play in sold out. So I played in a pre PTQ. So I qualified for the 32-man PTQ on Sunday. So I did not lose any games in the one I played. So I kind of won, but I'm not yet in possession of an invite, but I will be in a few days. I like this format. I'm feeling good about this format, actually.
Nice. Would you play again?
I played Jeskai Fires.
Like how different from Paulo's deck?
Let me call up Paulo's deck. It was funny. I think I didn't get to where Paulo got on something. I just did the thing that he did. I didn't familiarize myself with all the nuances. Let's see. I played one more Bone Crusher Giant than Paulo, but he played 2 in the sideboard. I didn't play any in the sideboard. He played 2 Justice Strikes in the sideboard. I played 1 and 1. I played 4 Aether Gust. He played 3 between main and side. I had all 4 on my sideboard. My deck's pretty similar to Paulo's, 27 land, and he played 3 Shimmer. I played 4 Shimmer. They were pretty close. I think the main thing is Paulo was ahead of me on he had no Legion Warboss at all, which I think is right. I think 1 is the optimal number of Legion Warboss because then you can show it to people. But I actually just got edge because people were sideboarding flame sweeps and stuff, and I just never had my Warbosses in any games. It's all about Aether Gust and Mystical Dispute, I think. And he was on 2+1 Aether Gust. I had 4 in the sideboard. I thought they were great. I think Jeskai Fires is possibly unplayable, though, even though it just won the Grand Prix.
Yeah. So we should talk about Standard, including the Pro Tour, and why you think it's unplayable, even though it just won the Grand Prix.
Yes. Let's just keep going on this one.
You want to
just keep going?
You got it, dude. All right. First of all, why do you think it's unplayable?
So, I saw all these decks coming for that, from the pre-regs for Mythic Championship VII, and I was just splitting cards with one of my friends, and he actually had most of the cards. So he first picked Simic, which is the reason that I got Jeskai Fires, and then we played after the tournament, etc. I think I won maybe 1 game in the set. I have not felt that beat up in a matchup in years. And I think everybody knows that Simic Flash was the highest performing deck of Mythic Championship VII. So it's real bad if you're on the Jeskai side. I don't even know what you can do.
It seems atrocious to me.
All your cards are sorcery speed. All your action is 4 or more mana. Do you have
Teferi is your best card.
Yeah, but it doesn't resolve. So the problem is their deck has a ton of counterspells that are 1 or 2 mana that can counter Teferi. So I think the game that I won, I resolved Teferi, but it's so miserable. I don't know how you could ever win. They just you're just if you try to slow play them, then they double spell you. They actually have spells that are action that cost less than 4 and 5, and the Jeskai Fires deck, everything that you actually can functionally win with is an enormous amount of mana. So it's just trivial for them to do nothing and then just cast an ambusher and kill you with it.
I think Seth and companies obviously Javier and Brad also made top 8. And if you're ever, those are 2 of the best there are when it comes to tuning decks. But I think Seth's Simic Flash deck is actually a deceptively smart, it's deceptively unusual. It's under the hood. It's not just a Flash deck. This deck's got, it's 2 parts, maybe it's 3 parts Flash, 1 part ramp. It's got some properties that are not typically the way that you see in most tempo decks, where it's got first of all, it's only got 4 Nightpack Ambusher, 2 Hydra Crassus, and 4 Nissa Who Shakes the World to really win with, which is fine. But it doesn't have almost any removal.
No, right? It's got 2 Aether Gusts in the main deck and
2 Brazen Borrower.
Yeah, like
And
none of that is permanent responses to anything.
and then unlike a lot of ramp decks, it's using counter spells as its ramp. Like it's got 26 land, then there's Paradise Druids and Growth Spiral. So it's still 33 mana like a ramp deck. Normally, flash decks are never even remotely close to that much mana.
So the whole theory on this deck, which is, the inclusion of 3 Paradise Druid and 4 Growth Spiral, is just the acceleration specifically from 2 to 4 is insane in this deck, right? So if you just leave your mana open and then, you might quench them, you might gust them, you might negate them on turn 2, or if they don't do anything because they know that all those terrible things might happen to them, you just cast your Growth Spiral, you play your 4th land, then 3rd and 4th land, untap and say go. It's turn 3 and you're already in Ambusher Zone or Frilled Mystic, if that's the way it's going to go. But the thing that is, I think, a really non-intuitive, innovative leap was that you can just cast Paradise Druid and it's probably not going to die, right? And then you just play your 3rd land the next turn. You're in the same spot. It's just not the thing that people have been thinking about with these kind of with these kinds of flash cards rather, and it just works here. The other thing that I found to be extraordinarily, tactical about this deck is that you can kind of line yourself up and you're playing against a deck that has good interaction, has permission spells or whatever, and you're like EOT Nightpack Ambusher, and they're like, whew, took care of that. And you're like, untap Nissa, shake the world, and they're like, well, that's worse.
I think part of the purpose of this deck is how smart of a metagame call it is in a format with no aggro and no control.
Do you think this would really have a hard time against control?
Definitely.
You mean like wrathing type stuff, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Like, for instance, not like some weird Dance the Mance deck, but if you just played with like the kind of Esper deck you would imagine Waffo would play, like this deck has almost no card. Like this deck is so much air. It's got 33 mana, 15 counter spells if you count Aether Gust. So if somebody's playing Esper, that's a dead card. But like, it's not like if you're playing as Esper, you want to load up your deck on Quenches and Aether Gusts and even just having a bunch of Frilled Mystics and stuff. It's not like you could possibly beat them at that game.
Well, I mean, it depends. Like,
and you only have 10 cards to do anything, and only 2 of them are the Crassus.
Well, the big problem is that one of your 10 cards that do something is Nissa, which exposes you in a different way, right? If the opponent has already got like a Teferi or something, which that kind of deck might be able to resolve at a higher level of regularity than, say, Jeskai Fires, they could set you up with a Thought Eraser or something, because we're talking about Esper, or they can go like 4 mana Teferi plus Mystical Dispute, something like that. Just obviously, Jeskai doesn't have those plays, at least in game 1. Now, all of a sudden, you're like, all right, my big spell's Nissa, and they're like, oh, man, that's terrible. And they like let you make two guys or something, and they just cleansing you, and you're annihilated.
Yep.
It's just Armageddon. So, yeah, but this...
Well, wait. Why is it Armageddon?
Because like, if they time wipe you, they blow up your lands. If they cleansing you, they blow up your Nissa only. They don't blow up your lands in that case. But
yeah. Time wipe is the one I thought. Yeah. Okay, I just want to make sure. No, planar cleansing.
I did misspeak, and that deck does play both cards. So, so time wipe, or if we're talking about Esper, it's probably Kaya's.
Kaya's Wrath, definitely, yeah.
So this strategy probably would have to be modified, given everybody's going to be informed about it for this coming weekend for my 32-man. Let's call it an invitational professional qualifier. Is going to be informed and going to know this is one of the best decks. But this strategy is on my short list. But I think have to make some changes, big changes, because of all the stuff we're probably going to talk about today.
You're talking about the Fires deck now, or the Simic Flash deck?
Simic Flash. I don't think Fires is playable. I just don't even.
You think it's just too bad against Simic Flash?
It's like utterly unwinnable, and like. Even like so, I've thought about some cards that would make Izzet pretty favored against Simic Flash, I think, and they don't even work in Jeskai, even though Jeskai can cast the same cards. But what I definitely want to talk about Nassif's deck in a little bit, so we can talk about it at that point. But I think, like, what do you think about just adding, like, the traditional Simic Flash cards to the sideboard, like Brineborn Cutthroat or the Spectral Sailor just to the sideboard for the mirror match? So, like you said, they have no removal. Like, high leverage beatdown creatures are like super powerful utility creatures like Spectral Sailor. You can probably resolve one and then win with it. They're also not good at blocking flyers.
I don't know. I guess I'd have to play with it some.
Like, most of the cards that they're bringing in that match are just not that exciting. You know, like, what are you going to do? Like, Spyglass their Nissa? I kind of don't care.
So talk to me about Nassif's deck.
Okay, so this is the deck. I think if there is like a top level podcast deck to play this week, I think it's this one. I'll tell you why. It's got
I don't know about that.
4X,
I got a different recommendation already.
4X Gadwick the Wizard for you, and it's got Embercleave for me.
Dude, I'm not playing Gadwick Embercleave. There's no way I'm co-signing that. All right, talk to me about this. Is it madness?
The hat has it, man. He got it. All right, so I really like this deck, and the reason I like it is because I think that it gives you a lot of the same kind of action as the Simic Flash. Like, not obviously as powerful top end with kind of Nissa plus Hydroid Crassus, but that same kind of, you know, leave your mana open, force the opponent to play into your mana, and then, like, really, really high return on cards like Brazen Borrower, and then you've got Gadwick as your, you know, if you're like trade, you're like Gadwick is the hammer. I really like that aspect of the deck. But the big thing that this deck has that Simic Flash doesn't have is the ability to remove a GD Edgewall Innkeeper. Like,
I do like
Pack.
Scorching Dragonfire and Rowl's Outburst and Bone Crusher Giant.
Or, I mean, there's
this is pretty sweet. You have me scared. I'll admit, one Embercleave in the sideboard sounds a little loose to me, but I'd expect nothing less from Nassif. I could get behind this deck.
I think I'm going to play through in my main deck, actually. It's too...
Why?
Because you're hitting him for 100. I like hitting people. So,
dude, you're out of control.
So here's my...
Don't do it.
Here's my innovation. Capital I innovations. I am drafting on the powerful brain space and brand of my good friend Patrick Chapin. Here's my...
What's the idea?
Niv Mizzet Perun in the sideboard.
Okay, that's fine.
Like,
I don't know about these Embercleaves though, man.
Maybe, okay, so what if we have Niv Mizzet Perun in the sideboard? You just cast it against Simic Flash. It resolves. The number of cards they have to interact with it is like 3 total between deck and sideboard. And if you untap with it, they can never block it, and it will annihilate them. Like...
You don't have to explain to me why Niv Mizzet is good.
It's great in this deck, right? Interesting.
Sure.
It's
this
terrible.
blue-red deck, yeah.
It's terrible in Jeskai. I'm just like, maybe I can fix... Because, like, I think Jeskai is better against cat food and adventures than Simic. What if I just put Niv Mizzet in my Jeskai sideboard? I was just like, this deck doesn't even have any way to trigger it. It's terrible. This deck is a bunch of dudes.
I gotta admit, man, I think you're right. It's hard for me to like. I do have another deck I really like.
Yeah.
But Nassif's a man after my own heart.
He was just like a...
This deck is sweet.
It's just like a tiebreaker out of the top 8. Like, this deck seems awesome to me.
He went 8 and 6, man. Let's not like put too fine a point on it.
I talked to him actually. He said he thought it was like that. He thought Simic was a better deck. But I think,
of course.
But the fact that everybody knows about Simic and knows about cat food, I think, like, I don't know. I mean, I could easily see myself playing Simic, but I think this is where my heart...
You can't help yourself. You can't help yourself. You want to be fancy.
Too good. No way, man. I'm playing, like, on MTG Arena. I went to the 4 Gadwick Mono Blue. I was playing Mono Blue with no Gadwick for months. I went to 4 Gadwick Mono Blue, and let me tell you something. In those games that you are capable of winning, Gadwick just frustrates the heck out of the opponent. Like, every single card in your hand is like, nah, not going to block. Sorry, buddy. I'm going to attack with all these Brineborn cutthroats that keep getting bigger. Yeah, I love it. I think this deck is great. I want to rouse outburst people's face. I want to scorch their cats. I want to coil their cats. It's going to be fantastic. And then also, I think I would play 4 Aether Gust between main deck and sideboard. I don't see why people... Aether Gust seems like the no-braineriest card to play in this format. It's good against literally every single deck but Azorius. I mean, it's not that good against Izzet Flash, actually, but it's like still got text. It's fantastic against Jeskai. It's fantastic against Simic. I love it. I don't know why you wouldn't play 4 between main and side. That's a change I'd make, and obviously the disputes are probably at the height of how good they can be in any deck in the Izzet Flash deck.
Man, you're just so on the blue-green deck. Isn't the Champs deck just, like, unreal?
All right. The Champs deck. Jund Sacrifice by Canister. Talk to me about this deck. Why do you love it?
Okay, so there's some differences in this Jund Sacrifice deck compared to most Jund Sacrifice decks, and I still think Jund Sacrifice was good to begin with. First of all, I am super duper duper a 4 Casualties of War guy, and Casualties of War is unreal.
I think like the title of our episode 2 weeks ago was "Play 4 Casualties of War," something like that. I agree with you.
Right,
Casualties of War is where you want to be at the top end, I think. And
this is the best Casualties of War deck. Next.
Next? That's the end of the...
No, I'm just saying the next... No. That's the end of the Casualty of War segment of what I like about his deck. So, Beanstalk Giant is an interesting direction to take the deck as a replacement for Once Upon a Time. You know, like some players, such as actually in the top 8 of this tournament, Miguel de Cruz Simoes had a District Guide, and actually District Guide and Midnight Reaper, of all things. But the use of Beanstalk Giant is actually really cool for being the first to the party with a Casualties of War deck. Like,
wow.
Like, being able to Casualties of War ahead of schedule is so amazing.
Oh, and if you start with the Goose, you can even Beanstalk Giant early.
Oh, yeah. Plus, I think it's another way to get a big threat that really comes up. Because when you're just sitting around doing all this Trail of Crumbs... So that's part of his Trail of Crumbs, being able to find the giant and then give you even more mana. Super dope. But this is a deck that ends up with a ton of mana in play, despite how many... And so the 8/8 or whatever is like a real threat. And you got the space, because I don't think that you actually want to play Nissa in this deck. Like, I think Nissa is a very powerful card, and a lot of people were playing it, but I think that right now, so many people are like bent on fighting Nissa. And it's not like this deck can defend its Nissa very well, because one of the other things I love so much about this deck is the lack of removal. There's 2 Murderous Riders and 4 Casualties of War.
Well,
and Massacre Girl, if you count that.
Massacre Girl, I think, is gonna take a lot of bodies down. I think like the whole thing with this deck is you gum up the board. Everybody's kind of like staring at each other. You might have like, you know, some 3/3s and 3/4s that are going to prevent a lot of active attacking, and then you utilize the text on Trail of Crumbs to get cards like Massacre Girl or Murderous Rider, because your removal is also a permanent.
Yeah. I like Brontodon in the format. I like Carvold if you can play. If you got the mana for it, you know, you can cast Carvold. It's a good card for the strategy. Mayhem Devil I can take or leave.
So I used to feel that way about Mayhem Devil, but I actually watched some of Canister's matches, and I mean, this deck's been all over MTG Arena this week with no surprise because of that performance, and I actually have learned to really appreciate the Devil. There's just
I love it in blue, right? Like the fact that you can like shoot Brazen Borrowers and stuff.
Yeah,
But go ahead. Sorry,
No, I mean, like, there's just subtle things like if you have multiple food in play, you can like sacrifice a cauldron familiar to Witch's Oven to get it in the graveyard, and then obviously you get a trigger from that, and then you can sacrifice like 3 or 4 food in a row. Like sacrifice a food to put the cauldron familiar in play in response because it's not in play yet, right? It's still in the graveyard, so it has the graveyard text. In response, sacrifice another food. Do that a couple of times, and then you can line them up into a fireball like effect, which I thought was like super novel. Like I think a lot of people think of the food token / cauldron familiar / Witch's Oven kind of trifecta, and like that's like a one action cycle. But if you stockpile, you can actually take repeated actions, and I think like I didn't even realize that until I watched some of the play.
I also like Deathless Knight in the sideboard. I think that's really cool.
Yeah, talk to me about this card.
Golgari for a 4/2 haste Skeleton Knight. So it's a 4/2 haste, and when you gain life for the first time each turn, you return Deathless Knight from your graveyard to your hand. It is a tool for grinding. You see, against somebody who has like counterspells or removal, Deathless Knight is a very real threat. I mean, a 4/2 haste can put some pressure on people, and it's something that kind of demands an answer. Especially the fact that you could just kill Teferi. You're going to just Teferi and you just kill it. But like the big thing is that it's just a 4/2 haste threat, and it turns all your food into a form of card advantage that can be used for grinding. I just think it's pretty cool. I mean, this deck has 1 mountain. Every other land in the deck casts Deathless Knight.
What do you think about the presence of that 1 mountain? So there is one Corvold Curse King in the sideboard, 2 in the main deck, and then Mayhem Devil, which you said you could give or take. Like, do you think that the presence of red is just a definite thing that you want to have in this strategy for those 2 cards? Because there's nothing else in red.
Yeah, I like it.
Yeah,
I just don't think the opportunity cost is that high. It's not that it's so overwhelming. It's just that you don't have enough other good stuff to do.
Well, I mean,
Mayhem Devil and Corvold, 2 of your payoffs. What payoffs are you going to play? But you just don't even have very many payoffs in your deck. Besides putting the cat in the oven and Trail of Crumbs, what's your engine?
I mean, you could just potentially be playing more copies of cards like Murderous Rider, Massacre.
Yeah, I don't want to play some mediocre control deck.
Okay.
I want to play the engine. I think the engine is really good against like Simic, for instance.
Oh, yeah. Obviously, this deck is really, really powerful against Simic Flash. I think he beat everybody who made...
Well, it's weird. Yeah, it's weird because he went 4-4 on day 1. Fortunately, your record gets thrown out and XO'd the next 2 days. Just had to survive to get into the winner's bracket where he could just beat up on the Simic Flash decks. And see, that's part of the reason why I think that this is still my recommendation for deck to play. I think that a lot of people are going to be enamored with the Simic Flash deck.
Yeah.
I think this deck is both really good, rock-solid strategy at a baseline, great power level, a great improvement to the archetype, and matches up well against the deck that everybody's playing.
Do you think this is close to the strongest, power level deck in Standard right now? If not the strongest?
Power level, like most powerful cards?
Yeah, most powerful deck, most powerful straight. Like this individual.
I don't know what you mean by that. What do you mean? Individual Cauldron, Familiar, Witch's Oven, and Trail of Crumbs are not the individually powerful cards. They are it's a very, very synergistic core to that engine. But I mean that the surrounding architecture, it's all fine. It's definitely about the fact that Casualties of War goes the biggest. To me, the Cat Oven Trail of Crumbs engine is very big, and the Casualties of War endgame is very big. This is the deck at the top of the format in terms of most power. It's not the most individually efficient rate of cards, but neither Simic, right? I mean, I don't know.
Like the Simic deck, maybe it is. It's just that a lot of those counterspells suck.
Yeah, I was thinking like maybe Fires is the most powerful deck. I mean, these are both powerful decks, right? Like clearly,
But not really. I mean, because the Fires deck, it's still a bunch of medium cards that are good with Fires of Invention. I just they're all they're. I mean, it's mostly just synergy decks right now.
speaking,
Don't really just play any good stuff decks. The ramp deck that Mengucci played is like a little bit. It's I guess Mengucci's deck is probably the most raw power.
oh yes, this is a super powerful deck. I agree.
Instead of playing all the lame, like the mediocre counterspells, he's playing more Hydroid Crassus and Risen Reef and Cavalier of Thorns. That said, I like the Simic Flash deck better. But this deck's like cards are inherently the best.
This deck is actually deceptively durable, I think, to interaction. Right?
Well, I would hope so. I don't know if it's deceptive. That's like the only thing it has going for it.
Like, yeah, I'm just saying, like, a lot of ramp decks, you know, if they ramp, and then you just counter their big spell or, you know, terror their big guy, then they're out. But this deck actually, a lot of its big payoff cards being, you know, Cavalier of Thorns, Hydroid Crassus, and Finale of Devastation, all potentially generate card advantage. So, you know, even if they've got an answer for you, you kind of still have a little bit more.
Well, what do you think of Quasiduplicate? That's the real sneaky, sweet tech in this deck, right?
Yeah, so Quasiduplicate is 1 UU for a sorcery. It creates a token that's a copy of target creature you control, and it has Jumpstart, right? So the thing that you can do in this deck is, for example, you can cast a card like, I don't know, Cavalier of Thorns, put extra land into play, and then duplicate the Cavalier of Thorns, and then generate those same come into play triggers, right?
Well, the one that's even more exciting is Risen Reef. You get a pack rat exponential thing. Like if you just play Risen Reef on turn 3,
Yep.
your Quasiduplicate gets 2 triggers, and then when you jumpstart it, you get 3 more triggers.
Risen Reef is the one you really want to copy because you're getting kind of a scaling, like a geometric increase, like a pack rat type thing, where like you play Risen Reef natural on 3 or whatever, the Quasiduplicate on the following turn gives you 2 Risen Reef triggers, one for the Risen Reef that's already in play and one for the copy. And then when you jumpstart it, you get 3 more Risen Reef triggers. So you actually end up with 5 Risen Reef triggers off of your Quasiduplicate. Plus now, if you play any, like for instance, you play a Leafkin Druid, and suddenly it's a 4-for-1.
The cool thing about Risen Reef in this deck is obviously you get acceleration in the case that you're turning over lands. This deck has a ton of lands, right? It has 28 lands, almost 50% lands. So that happens sometimes. But then also, you know, you could just potentially draw into your threats and get payoffs that way as well. I think that this deck is benefiting a lot in a similar way to the other Simic deck of just a lack of a lot of Wraths in the format right now.
Yeah, and fast aggro to have to keep you honest. Like a fast Knights deck could be a problem.
Yeah. The Simic deck, I think, puts up a better fight because they can just drop a 4/4 quickly. The other Simic deck, I should say, Flash.
I think the Simic Flash deck can beat you. It just gets you on the merits. Like it can time walk you at the key times.
Yeah. Do you like this deck at all? It's the most.
I like it. I just don't like where it's at. I don't like where it's at in the format because I don't want to be playing this deck when my opponent's going to Casualties of War me. And I don't want to play this deck when my opponent's playing another Simic deck with 15 counterspells.
I agree with both of your statements.
It is sweet to Quasiduplicate Agent of Treachery.
Is it sweet to Finale of Devastation for the Big Pig and Ray's Forerunners?
I don't know. Maybe.
But yeah, I think this deck it's sweet. I don't think it's where I'd want to be next week.
It seems fun.
Yeah.
It seems very fun.
Does anybody have is there any kind of an aggressive Knights deck that you into?
There was a Knights deck that I was like a super novel name. It looks like pretty unique strategy, but it doesn't seem to have gotten any wins. John Rolfe played a Rakdos Fires deck to looks like 0 wins. There were not a lot of aggressive decks. I think the most aggressive decks were some variations of Golgari Adventures.
To me, that's not really counting. I think Golgari Adventures is mostly just a worse John Sacrifice deck.
Okay, so let's look at like Chris Kavartek's deck. Chris finished circa 3rd. I think this deck is meaningfully different than some of the other Golgari Adventure decks we've seen in the past. So this deck...
It is cool. This is an interesting twist.
Yeah, so Chris played 4 Rotting Regisaur in the main deck alongside 3 The Great Henge. Now, obviously, the Great Henge gets much cheaper when you have like 7 power creatures in your main deck. And the theory here is that Rotting Regisaur is too big for the Cavaliers decks, right? So it's bigger than a 5/5. And at the end of the day, a lot of those guys like Kenrith and Cavalier of Gales and stuff are just creatures that are ultimately attacking and blocking. This card can put an enormous amount of pressure on Jeskai specifically. Separately, I think this deck has an advantage on the fundamentals against Simic because, Edgewall Innkeeper is just...
There's no way this deck has an advantage against Simic.
You don't think so?
No. No way.
Simic Flash?
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe I'm missing it, but I don't know. I admittedly I don't know how to evaluate Rotting Regisaur, Vivian Arcbow Ranger, and the Great Henge in context. Maybe they give enough of an edge, but like the old style Golgari Adventure deck is not going to mess with Simic.
Like the complete inability to interact with Edgewall Innkeeper outside of like a couple of Aether Gusts is, they're just drawing mad cards a turn. And they have cards like Foulmire Knight that they're triggering card draw with, and it just kills your sweet guys or kills your lands.
Have you played the matchup?
No,
I did a bunch.
Yeah, all right. And Simic beats the bejesus out of Golgari.
I don't know. I did, and I'm not even good. But I don't know. Maybe it's different now. I don't know. It could be that Rotting Regisaur, Vivian Arcbow Ranger, and the Great Henge do enough. I don't know. It's not where I'd want to be in the format. Maybe it's okay. I don't know. Admittedly, there's enough to learn here. I'd be interested. You mentioned Golgari Sacrifice earlier. Are you talking about something similar to like Yuza's 9th place deck?
Yeah.
So I can't get behind 2 Casualties of War. I am a 4 Casualties of War guy. Other than that, though, I don't know. I think this deck is sweet. Bolas the Citadel is an interesting twist, but I don't know that I would want to have 4 Midnight Reaper, 4 Murderous Rider, 3 Wicked Wolf. Like that's a lot of that stuff.
Yeah, you can just cut a couple of those and add the Casualties War that you wanted. The question is whether you're getting enough out of life points, I guess, because you're not playing with Stomping Ground and...
Yeah, but all that's a free roll. There are no aggro decks.
Yeah, so if you think that's a free roll, then there's no reason not to Brian Kibler it up, especially when you can Beanstalk Giant for that mountain.
Yep. Dude, Ben Stark playing a blue-white control deck.
Last time he did that, he won the Pro Tour, right?
So no, he plays blue-white control for a bit. But so this is a kind of like a deck we were talking about 2 weeks ago, only instead of the 4th Gatwick, he's playing 3 Gatwicks and 1 Finale of Revelation, which I actually like because I think that the shuffle your graveyard back part of Finale of Revelation is quite good for this strategy. But 4 Brazen Borrower, totally understandable. 4 Teferi, obviously. 4 Opt, 3 Aether Gust, 3 Dovin's Veto, a Finale of Revelation, 4 Absorb, 2 Chemist's Insight, 2 Time Wipe, 3 Pointer Cleansing, with 2 Castle Arden Vale and 3 Castle Vantress. I like this deck, man.
I think that I would go with the 4th Gatwick, but
instead of something else, not the Finale, right? You want the finale so that you don't get decked.
I was planning to cut the finale, but if you say so. The previous iterations of this deck, or similar decks anyway, played cards like Agent of Treachery and Mass Manipulation.
I don't want any of that stuff.
So here, I actually would have always said I don't want any of that stuff. But here's...
Well, I used to want that stuff. Now I don't.
See, I didn't want that stuff ever. I like this strategy better. There is a reason why I think you might want to have some access to that kind of stuff. I think, like, as the metagame shifts, I think that because of the novelty of the Simic Flash deck, I think people are going to be looking for ways to get stuff past permission. And I'm just thinking about the existence of cards like Chandra Awakened Inferno. Like you will lose to that card if somebody plays it. And it's not such a corner card. I think like that's the kind of card that could rise in popularity because people are aware of permission decks.
So?
I'm saying I just want to have some tools. Right now.
Yeah, but dude, just pointer cleansing.
Yeah, but you might not be able to race one emblem.
I don't think that's what Agent of Treachery is for. If you can't race an emblem, you can't race an emblem, but it's not like the Agent of Treachery is how you wanted to resolve that.
Yeah, but if you
try to keep up, absorb some spells, make some tokens, Gatwick to, Brazen Borrower. I'm not saying it's good for you. But I'm just saying Agent of Treachery, I think, is not the right way to fight Chandra.
All right.
Although if you just play black for Thought Erasure, you won't have that problem.
So do you think that there's enough juice that you get out of black that you want to deviate from the straight blue-white?
I'd have to play some. I do love the black cards, but I think it's possible that you get enough mileage out of Aether Gust that you might not need to.
The thing is, I think if you're black, you have to cut some of the Castle Ardenvale, Castle Vantress action.
Totally.
And I think that a big part of the value of this deck is that it's a 27 land deck that can actually eke some value out of having a ton of extra lands in play. And that's not to be minimized.
Sure. Does Haynes Esper deck do anything for you? It's not a Gatwick deck, obviously, for mana, but like it's 2 copies of Kenrith the Returned King, which is kind of interesting. So, along with 3 Elite Guard Mages, a Hero Precinct 1, 4 Narset, 4 Teferi.
So, caveat, I love Hayne. Love Hayne. Second caveat, obsessed with Esper. Have been tooling around with a bunch of different Esper builds past couple of weeks.
It sounds like a big butt coming.
I do not know why you would want to play this deck. Like, what the heck? 1 Hero Precinct 1 and then a bunch of, like, single-colored cards? Like, literally, his curve is Hero of Precinct 1 into quad Narset. Like, so here's the thing. I think Narset might be a great card in this format. For example, Narset does a doozy of a job against a Cavalier, right? Like, if your plan is to go, like, Cavalier off of a fire, Blue Cavalier in particular off of a fires, Narset is pretty annoying. Narset is the kind of card that if you land it in, maybe not like a permission fight, because this isn't really like a permission deck, although it's, trying to get a material card advantage kind of game plan. It's good. It's a good card, but like, why do you play Hero of Precinct 1? Why would you even want to play Elite Guard Mage? It's such a low power card for this strategy. Like, if you wanted to play a card at that mana, there's so many better cards you could be playing that do similar things. I don't know. I don't know. I do not know why you would want to play this deck. It's like the amount that I love the deck that Nassif played compared with the amount I'm just scratching my head on this deck is similar.
Yeah, I mean, not a chance I would want to play this deck, but I love where his heart's at. It might be slightly too futuristic for me right now. But maybe it's good. I don't know.
How do you come to the conclusion that 1 Disfigure and 1 Duress is right? Like in the main deck. Just like...
I don't. I actually like that.
Yeah?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't like the 1 Hero Precinct 1. But I actually like 1 Duress and 1 Disfigure. I actually think that's sweet.
I mean, Kenrith seems like a weird card to play to me.
Kenrith is a weird card, but that's a card that makes me want to sit up, take notice. I'd have to actually play to see what it's like. I could imagine Kenrith actually being good.
So Kenrith has the black ability in this deck. So in the Jeskai deck, I was really, really impressed by the amount of, just extra stuff Kenrith was doing for me. Because when you're not paying any mana for it, you just like kick up the white ability a bunch of times, so your opponent just can't win sometimes, right? Like, all right, I'm just going to gain 5 life, and maybe you gain like 20.
Gain 5 more.
Yeah, over the course of a game, right? Like, and they're like, all right, this is impossible to race. You don't even spend any mana for your spells. But in this deck, you have to tap all your mana for Kenrith, and you don't get the red ability. So I think the red ability was the most commonly used ability in the Jeskai deck, obviously.
Yeah, but this deck can't really use the red ability anyway.
You can't use it, right? There's no bum rushing with like 3 Cavaliers or anything. But the black ability, that's a nice ability.
Yeah.
You can get that hero back.
Or you can just draw cards with the blue ability, man.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just trying to think of like what texture Kenrith brings to this deck that's outside of what it's bringing to other strategies. And that black ability, I think, has some text. I mean, is Drown in the Loch even good in this deck? It's not like building its graveyard actively or anything.
Dude, it makes a token off a hero.
Don't tempt me.
Yeah, I don't know. This deck seems... It could be good. I'd have to play. I wouldn't just sign up for this one blind, though. So I will say, though, that as far as blue-white versus Esper goes, Ephro played blue-white, which makes me think the blue-white was correct.
Yeah. Yeah,
Ephro is the nut.
But our representation of Esper is just Hane's deck right now.
Yeah, I'm not saying Hane is also the nut, but Hane can win with some interesting decks. Ephro does it the old-fashioned way. He picks really, really good decks.
Yeah, and just goes with the... Did he play the same build as Stark?
Identical, yeah.
How do you like that deck?
No aggro decks at all, anywhere.
Do you think that means there's room for aggro, or do you think that means aggro is going to get murdered if you try to play it?
Sadly, probably get murdered. But maybe there's an opportunity. Maybe, like, part of the challenge, though, is I'm trying to imagine what the Knights deck looks like that both beats Simic Flash and Jund Sacrifice. And that's to say nothing of Jeskai Fires, So
the problem, I think, with... If you're going to say, like, Black-Red Knights, the problem at hand is that that deck typically plays, like, Cat Engine, right? Even though it's a Knights deck. And,
no.
And
No, I'm not going
to... Just straight Knights.
Yeah.
I don't know.
If I was going to play the Cat Engine, I would just play Jund.
So you're just talking like Javier Dominguez,
Embercleave, baby, boom.
Like the Thunderfist guy. What's his name? That guy is pretty good, right? He's like double Bob. Everyone takes damage. 2/2 for 2. I can get behind that guy. And then just attack people. There's nothing fancy about this deck, right? It's just like
nope, Embercleave, I guess.
1/2 for 1. Pump some stuff. Embercleave. Yeah, I mean. It's I think I could get behind that deck. I mean, I'm in for any deck that's quad Embercleave. If your deck can plausibly play 4 Embercleaves, I'm in. I think this is my dream. My dream is to qualify this weekend with Niv Mizzet in play wearing Embercleave. That's like 12 damage, bro.
Oh yeah, at least. Depending on if they try to fight back.
That would be crazy. I hesitate to imagine I would have Embercleave and Niv Mizzet in my deck at the same time, but I might want to do it just for the photo finish. Just for the, three Fords crossing the finish line at the same time, like in Ford versus Ferrari.
Sure.
That's not a good way to build your sideboard strategy, though, right?
I mean,
Not traditionally, no.
So you're thinking Jund Sacrifice first choice, right?
I am.
So yeah, Jund Sacrifice is still my pick. I just think it's a great deck, well positioned. I would rather play a Gatwick deck, and I think that the way that Nassif's got it set up is really cool, and I think the way that Ephra's got it set up, there's something solid there. Depending on, I'd want to play some to see how its Simic Flash matchup felt, because I could imagine being a little bit behind there, and I don't think this is a good weekend for that. But if I'm making a recommendation, it's Jund Sacrifice, like the champ.
Yeah, so my major reason I don't want to play Jund Sacrifice is, like, I don't have very many reps with it, like approximately 0. And this is a deck that has a tremendous number of things to do and things to keep track of. And so even if it's like a super solid deck, I'm just worried that I won't play it at the same level of competence as some of the other decks. Like, I think I can play... I know I can play Simic at a high level of competency. I know I can play Jessica at a high level of competency. I'm very wary about my own ability with Jund.
Well, that's actually kind of actually speaks to an underrated topic. I think a lot of people don't put as much stock as they should into being smart about knowing thyself. It's not about always playing to your strengths, but when you're practicing, when you're preparing, when you're studying, when you have enough time to level up, your range of options, like how you go about selecting your strategy, is a little different than when you're like, okay, what am I going to play this weekend? And so sometimes when you have a short testing cycle, if you don't have a lot of time to experiment and to learn all the sequences, sometimes you got to play to your strengths and just, particularly if it's a high leverage tournament like your PTQ, you know?
Yeah. Like, I just recall something that Hayne told me recently, which was like, I was thinking about the concept of being a specialist, where I had this mind space where I'm like, I'm a burn specialist in Modern. I'm a burn specialist. I'm like, oh, look at all the times I won with burn. And then Hayne's reaction was like, does that just mean you stink at every other deck? And I was just like, oh, wow. I never thought about it like that. But, like, that's a terrible moniker to carry now, right? Like, and it just, like, made me examine, like, how I've selected decks and how to spend your time, you know, that kind of thing. And I think, like, Jund Sacrifice has, like, a very high ceiling. I think that some of the other decks have, if a lower ceiling, not that much lower. I think, like, Simic, I think I'm first choice Izzet, second choice Simic, third choice Azorius. That's where I am right now. All going to be decks that are capable of throwing some Gust out there. I think Aether Gust is near the top card of Standard right now, just because it hits so many decks and it's so hyper flexible. But none of those decks I think is a runaway hit against both of the top decks, right? So I think, like, Izzet is the best against both of the top decks, but it's not runaway in either case. I think Azorius is probably great against Jund and terrible against Simic. We know Simic is at a disadvantage against Jund. It's a coin flip against itself. So I think picking right now is...
It is better against the field, though.
Simic?
Yeah, if you don't count the mirror matches or the head-to-head. If you don't count Jund Sacrifice and Simic, like, I think Simic is a little bit better against the... Maybe not. Maybe Jund Sacrifice is just the best deck, but I think Simic Flash is, like, probably better if you look at... Like, I think... Like, I like the Simic Flash side of almost every matchup in the format.
You think Simic Flash is way ahead of Izzet? I know it was a bit ahead of Izzet.
No, I don't. No, I don't have any experience with that. I could imagine Izzet being even... I could imagine it even being ahead once you get your Niv Mizzet action.
Yeah, I think it's ahead in 3.
It's probably close, but I don't think that one's runaway at all. I think a lot of Simic's matchups are not necessarily runaway. Some of them are, but some of them are not.
So I think there's also, like, I have kind of like an asterisk on that. All these guys who finished in the top 8 with their Simic Flash build, Brad Nelson, former Player of the Year, Seth Manfield, World Champion, Javier Dominguez. I don't even know how many titles this guy has running right now. Like,
and this year.
Yeah, like, Javier Dominguez is arguably the best player in the world right now. You know, it's like, these are 3 hyper elite constructed players. Like, that gave the deck a little more performance oomph, I think.
Totally.
So By the same token, if you look at the pilots on Is It Flash, Gabriel Nassif, Cuneo, William Jensen, Shahar Shenhar, same thing can be said there, and they performed much worse than Simic Flash. That's actually kind of a mitigating factor.
I don't know. I mean, Nassif finished like top 16, right?
Yeah.
That's not much worse. I mean, there were Simic Flash people who did not top 8. So I don't know. But yeah, in general, it's hard to beat putting 3 in the top 8,
And I think they all work together, right? I think that was...
Yeah. They all played almost identical. The only variation in the list was Javier Dominguez playing a second Kenrith's transformation instead of a sideboarded third Aether Gust. I think Kenrith's transformation is actually a pretty cool innovation, too. I think a lot of people didn't realize how much Oko wasn't just about the good rate, that Oko was actually doing work as a problem-solving form of interaction for a color combination that doesn't traditionally get it. You could do a lot worse than playing a 2-mana cantrip, and turning somebody's Cavalier or Sphinx into a 3/3 can be pretty dope sometimes.
Yeah, the fact that it...
Or Kenrith.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Wasn't there some really crazy deck that's maybe did Shouta Yasuoka play one? I think it only got 4 wins, but it's like this deck I think is worth talking about for a second, even if it only got 4 wins.
Okay, so Shota's Fires of Invention deck is kind of all over the place. I mean, to begin with, you played 4 Fires of Invention last weekend.
Yep.
I would want to play 4 Casualties of War. He did both. A lot of people wonder, should you play Agent of Treachery or Beanstalk Giant? He played both. He had room for Teferi, Hydroid Crassus, and Kenrith in addition to all these things, in part because he didn't actually have any removal spells in his entire deck. Not even the Realm Cloak Giant, nothing.
Time Wipe Hazards of War.
Did he have time? Oh, yeah, he did have 2 Time Wipes main deck.
Time Wipe is hot with Golos and Hydroid Crisis.
So this is one of those mana bases that, it takes a very sophisticated palette.
He didn't get the memo that there's no more field. He's like, I have all my 1-ofs. Let's go.
He's got a Temple of Triumph, a Temple of Silence, a Temple of Malady, a Temple of Epiphany, 3 Temple of Malady, 2 Temple Gardens, just keeping it going.
So you would not recommend this build, I think.
I don't know. I would love to try it because this deck looks sweet. This is an ambitious deck, though. This is an ambitious deck.
The thing that I found to be very interesting...
I got a tech card for this deck, by the way. I'll tell you in a second.
Is that Fires of Invention is so powerful when you're going off with it, but it's like the worst card in your deck whenever you're not going off. Right? It kind of turns off like your interactive spells.
So I've got a piece of tech for you.
I'm listening.
On Fires of Invention in this kind of a deck.
Yeah. And
how to make it better. So, last weekend was kicking it with Matt Place, legendary deck builder and one of the premier players year 1 of the Pro Tour. So Matt Place, I was kicking it at his place up in Washington, and he was packing a beaut. So he's playing 4 Niv Mizzet Reborn in his 5-color Fires of Invention deck. So, first of all, 4 Casualties of War when you have 4 Niv Mizzets in your deck? Yes.
Let's tutor it up.
There you go. So, and he's got 4 Teferis too, right? So having Teferis and Niv Mizzets and Casualties of War, I mean, that's... But here's the real tech. He's playing... I think he might be playing too many, but I'll hear him out, and I could imagine it looked pretty impressive when he was playing it. He played 4 of the Arc Bow.
Vivian's Arc Bow?
Yep.
We just get your mana in play and then you just go deep.
So here's some things you can do with the Arc Bow. First of all, when you've got Fires of Invention going, great way to spend your mana.
Oh, it's basically a spell. It's an extra spell.
And it doesn't count.
Yeah.
Next, when you're playing against people with 15 counterspells in their deck, even against Teferi, when your opponent has a Teferi, you can still just arc bow him.
So you land it and like it's just that's a big problem for them, right? As long as you have enough guys, that's the thing.
Yeah, you have to have enough guys in your deck, but like, and it's not like obviously you can't hit the Crassus either, but you get to look at a lot of cards when you get going. And if you, he also played Elite. He played a couple copies. Like he split his Crassus and his with the 2/3 flyer that you love so much. But
I hate having card mage. I hate that guy.
Yeah, it's pretty good with the arc bow, but I don't know. Maybe you could do better. I don't know. It's just that there's a bunch of cards in the deck that just you can get. You're really just trying to find Niv Mizzet though, because Niv Mizzet is unbelievable.
Yeah,
it
just draws 3 cards.
Well, and if one of them's Casualties of War, it's like you drew 10 cards.
I mean, if one of them's Crassus, it's like you do 10 cards.
Right. So I think you may want to consider experimenting a little bit. I think the Arc Bow is a really underrated card anyway, and it does give you some selection in an interesting way because you can like picture extra land to get more threats. You can take another Arc Bow and put it to use. The fact that you can actually use your mana efficiently, I would try it out. I think that's one of the most underrated cards in the format.
I'm actually sold. This makes plenty of sense to me, and I love the idea of it, of just landing it against a permission deck. Like, just go to town. If you've got like any good guys in your deck, like once you've untapped with the Arc Bow, right? Like you can afford to be patient. Their counterspells are all turned off.
Yeah, and if you're going to play Fires of Invention anyway, it's no big deal just not having like spells. And if you're playing Niv Mizzets anyway, you got to play with some cards. So, like for instance, instead of Growth Spiral, maybe you're supposed to play Paradise Druid. Just because... Oh, I forgot the other thing. I actually got him to take out some of the Elite Guard Mage action. Are you ready for this?
Yeah.
Basilica Bellhaunt.
Of course. That's much better.
Dude, it's so sick what you have to do to the mana, but it works. It's actually super dope when you're playing, because part of it is that Fires of Invention is such a good fixer for Basilica Bellhaunt. I mean, and by the time you get to Casualties of War anyway, you already have your mana, no problem. But the fact that you can just Arc Bow into Basilica Bellhaunts is so dope.
So, I mean, Basilica Bellhaunt seems like such an improvement over Sphinx in terms of a follow-up on Fires of Invention. Obviously, Sphinx's primary job is to find you Fires of Invention, but anytime it's like, your 8th or your 9th card, it's a little unexciting. But, Fires into Bellhaunt seems awesome to me. Yeah.
Yep. So I think, there's a lot to like there. A lot to like.
Oh my gosh, I wish we had this conversation 3 days ago. I would have ordered all the cards for this deck. Sight unseen. Let's go Golos. The one thing I would say that is cool about this deck is Fires of Invention kind of in that Cavalier spot. Golos taking the follow-up on 5 mana. You're just live, right? Like even if you don't have Fires, Golos can just get you the colors you need to land Casualties of War. It seems fantastic to me, and you get all the cuts at Kenrith. That's one of the really cool things about this is like you want to reanimate, you can reanimate. You want to draw cards, like this deck plays a sweet long game.
Yeah, and I mean he actually played Golos too. You can't go find it with your Niv Mizzet, but like it's a great get with your Arc Bow.
This Arc Bow thing sounds fantastic to me. I'm in.
Plus, dude, when you have Golos and then you activate it and you find Niv Mizzet, woo-wee!
Oh, wow, that's awesome. All right. If I weren't already married to 4 Gatwick covered in Embercleave, I'd be thinking about this. Thank you for the ideas, though.
Hey, good luck, and I'll see you next weekend, man. Bye-bye. Or next week. Bye. Have a good night, dude.
Life didn't work so great. Tried to play dredge, it's a jail or hate. Mostly prison waiting for my untapped phase. Your core trapped in amber stasis days. Lost a lot of friends, got left behind. Had to find a way not to lose my mind. Trapped in a vault